Good morning and welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Orlando. I'm Linnea Nelson and I'm the chair of the worship team here. With me in today's service are the Director of Music, Aubrey Connelly-Candelario, Paul Knight from the Board of Trustees, Reverend Marnie Harmony, Charlotte Kendall, and our worship director, and was previously Congregational Life Staff for the Pacific Western region. He's also a program leader for the UU College of Social Justice. Born and raised in the Philippines, most of Jonipher's adult life was spent in California and Hawaii. He served as the minister of the First Unitarian Church of Honolulu, where former President Barack Obama went to Sunday school as a child. Jonipher founded Ohana Metropolitan Community Church, MCC, in Honolulu, served as interim minister at Resurrection Beach MCC, and consulting minister at Sepulveda UU Society and the Temecula Valley UU Community. You are challenging me this morning with all these words. His nonprofit experience included serving as executive director of the Counseling and Spiritual Care Center of Hawaii and API Equality LA. Raised in an ecumenical background, Dr. Kwong values his pluralistic upbringing from evangelical to United Methodist, Episcopalian to Calvary Chapel. He was christened at a gospel church and baptized as a Chinese Mennonite. In Hawaii, Jonipher was a member of the Honolulu Mindfulness Community, a Sangha influenced by Zen Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh. Dr. Kwong, California at Santa Barbara, and prior to getting the call, Reverend Jonipher worked in the film industry for 3 years, followed by 2 years as a graphics specialist at McKinsey & Company in Los Angeles. Please join me in welcoming Reverend Jonipher to 1U today. Into a community of justice seekers with a commitment to lifelong spiritual growth and compassionate service to the community. Whoever you are, whoever you love, orientation, age, physical or mental abilities, economic status, or religious background. We welcome you. And for more information about our congregation and announcements, go to orlandouu.org or email info@orlandouu.org. And the nursery is open until noon for those of you who are looking for that. And an invitation or whatever attendees wish to discuss. Bring your beverage, and let's get to know one another a bit. And also, all are invited. Holly Near concert is September 9th. Get your tickets online. All other announcements are on slides before and after the service and have links to the weekly update or on our website. If you would like to follow along with the service, please use a QR code shown in the monitor and on the first few slides. Thanks again for being here in person or online today. Charlotte, please join me.
Please say the words with me as we light the chalice. In the light of truth and in the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to share. Please rise in body or spirit and join me in singing our opening hymn, number 207, Earth Was Given as a Garden. The words for all hymns will appear on the screen.
As we come into our time of worship, I share these words from the Reverend Peter Rabel. We warm ourselves by fires we did not light. We sit in the shade of trees we did not plant. We drink from wells we did not. Together we are more than any one person could be. Together we can build across generations. Together we can renew our hope and faith in the life that is yet to unfold. We are ever bound in community. May it always be so. And let us now enjoy a time of greeting one another.
Good morning. So today our story is one that I bet a lot of you have heard. I love it when the big kids come too. Haven't heard the story, you've probably seen this big boat filled with animals. And if you haven't, maybe next time you see it, you'll go, oh yeah. And this picture is of all those animals that were collected on the ark. Because God looked around, so this is a story that God looked around and said, being kind enough. We're gonna start over. So he found two very kind people. They're up all of the animals, but just two of each one. And he said to Noah, go find those two animals. So I'm wondering, what animals would you bring on the ark? What would you bring? A dragon, woohoo. How about you, River? You don't know. Anybody else? Hippos. Of course, hippos. We're going to have a big ark. But with that story, you've probably heard that before. So don't just go out and get seeds that you're going to eat. I want you to store these in the ark during the 40 days and nights of rain that's going to come. So with all the plants, what do you want to make sure we have? To bring, what plants would you want to make sure are here? Sunflowers, would you put a sunflower seed in there? Thank you. Watermelon and spinach. We're going to be strong. A lemon tree. And Naamah went around and she collected all of the... But Naamah was walking through the meadow looking for more seeds, and she walked right by the dandelions. And God said, don't forget the dandelions. And she said, but they're bag. So once she had her seeds and Noah had all the animals, they got on the ark just as it started to rain. And then think about this, hippos and peacocks, all the seeds, and of course some of them were blooming. And so now they had this beautiful smelling area to be. When they came down off the ark, Noah was carefully bringing all the animals down, and Naamah was carefully going down with her bag and sowing the seeds. Really, that's what she was doing. And so now, when we plant things in the ground, sometimes people say that we're planting in Naamah's garden. But you can plant these in the ground, and something magical will grow. So thank you. So with this little light of mine, and we have a way for you to get there that shows our love for you. Thanks for coming up, everybody.
It is one of our spiritual values which sustains the life and ministries of the church community that we live in. Let us be grateful for the opportunity to give, for it is a privilege for us to be able to do so. For our Share a Plate partner for July is the Joy Metropolitan Community Church Food Pantry, also known as Joy MCC. Joy MCC is a neighboring church of ours where to donate directly to the Joy MCC Food Pantry. And if you do donate via the link, please send us an email and let us know that you've done so. The offering Thank you, Aubrey. Let us join.
This is the time we set aside during our service for deep sharing of our hearts and for prayer and our collective sharing of joys and sorrows to be read each week during our Sunday worship service. You can send an email to Joy's table and hand it to an usher before the start of our service. And after the meditation, we will call you forward to participate in our candle lighting ritual. Bring your joys and your sorrows as we come together. Today's flowers are donated by Jeannie Carter in memory of her nephew Paul, who passed away 3 years ago. Welcome of a new bundle of joy named Elora Kai McIntyre, born on July 5th, 2023. Elora and Mom are both doing well. Returned from hiking in North Carolina to see beautiful waterfalls. There we go. And for the larger community, we continue to hold our Orlando community in love as Orlando and our state continues to need comfort and activism to eradicate hate. And for all the joys and sorrows in this community shared today, and for those that we hold close to our hearts, let us pray. Let us breathe in and breathe out this cleansing breath. For humanist and Christian, non-theist, Buddhist and Jew and pagan and seeker, a Unitarian Universalist congregation, slow to live the teachings of that faith as it has been handed down to us across every generation, from prophets, preachers, and men who have us understand what it is to be and what it is to love the neighbor in human relations. We are quick to acknowledge, but slow to temper that knowledge with the love and wisdom that leads us always close. For all the times we fail to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person, when we do not affirm and promote the goal of a global world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, when we live as though interdependence were a personal choice and not a fact of our existence, let us take a few minutes to enjoy the silence of our hearts. I now invite you to come forward and light a candle of remembrance, loving kindness, or hope as Audrey plays. Feel free to hum or sing along.
Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul, me, oh my soul. Please note for our viewers at home that this upcoming video can be accessed via the link in the chat box.
was a couple years ago when I went through a very acrimonious divorce process. I was living in Los Angeles at the time, and I knew I wanted to get as far away from my ex-husband as possible. So I looked at the map, and I saw Florida. And I thought, well, you know, compared to LA, the prices of the houses there are still somewhat affordable, but they did just pass the so-called Don't Say Gay law, right? Remember all that? So what did I do? I tried to do more research to figure out what life is like in the Orlando, Central Florida area. And so I phoned my lifeline. I called a friend, Marnie Harmony, right? And I said, hello, Marnie, can you tell me a little bit more about what it means to live in a don't say gay state? And she said, it's so weird talking to you as if you were a third person. I know you're sitting right there. But she said, oh no, don't worry about it. Here in Orlando, we do say gay, right? And in fact, she said, I'll refer you to my gay realtor to help you find a house, a gay tax preparer, and a gay hairstylist. And I thought, wait a minute, Marnie, isn't that redundant to say gay hairstylist? Are there actually straight ones out there? So I accepted gladly this invitation to move here, not knowing that it was in fact true, but I couldn't get outside a 15-mile radius from where I live, right? Because after that point, that's when I began seeing the Confederate flags and the Christian nationalist billboards, and let's just say that that was not very reassuring to encounter that. Not to mention the fact that after I moved here, a bunch more policies were passed by a presidential nominee, right? Y'all know who I'm talking about, I'm sure, because they both happen to be from the same state, right? So that got me even more worried, and not just because I know some people will say, like, this is all just a bunch of posturing and it's performative so that when they get to the national stage, they could prove to people just how unwoke they are, right? But for me, it goes much deeper than that. It harkens back to but for those of you who don't know, Anita Bryant was a has-been beauty queen turned orange saleswoman, right? And then when there were anti-gay bills that came along during that time, she was adamantly opposed to it, and the excuse she used was, save our children. Remember all of that, right? And thus, we see here, protect our children. So that messaging has not gone away. And quite honestly, I am sick of it. I am sick of using our kids as pawns for people's political gains. And let's talk about the fact, yeah, I heard an amen to that. And let's talk about the fact that 20% of Gen Zers identify as LGBTQ+. So the folks you see up here, which appears to me like a bunch of privileged, cisgendered, white kids, may not necessarily represent the entire community that we're talking about. If 1 out of 5 of our kids are LGBTQ+, who's gonna protect them? Are these laws gonna protect them, or is it gonna harm them? So this isn't about any one particular political candidate. So I'm not here to endorse or to reject anyone, but I am here to affirm our Unitarian Universalist values that say that all kids are in need of protection. And all kids need their genders affirmed. Can I get an amen to that? Right? And I want to say to you unequivocally this morning that here in this space, the First Unitarian Church of Orlando, you are loved, you are welcome here, if you're watching right now, that you belong, that your body is whole and holy. and that we welcome you with open arms. So that's the perspective I'm coming from. Oh, and by the way, if you're watching this and you've been hearing those other messages, I invite you to call the Trevor Project. So that's my PSA for today, all right? And so this got me thinking. I'm like, why are we focusing on all this nonsense anyway? You know, I mean, come on. It just breaks my heart that when I came here for the Mother's Day service, the two testimonies we heard were heartbreaking because they were about the future of the kids, right? And what kind of environment they're going to grow up in here in Florida. So I ran across this meme on Facebook. A few of you might have seen it as well. It's by my favorite comedian, Wanda Sykes, who says, "Until a drag queen walks into a school and beats 8 kids to death with a copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, I think you're focusing on the wrong stuff." Right? And how it's been used to justify the Crusades and to justify the taking away of reproductive rights of women, and to justify slavery, and again to justify really atrocious, ban dangerous and weaponized books. Let's take a look at that. So, with this in mind, I spiraled down at the beginning of this year, to be honest with you, into a very depressing place. And around February of this year, I went on a trip with my friend who happens to be a rabbi. And what happens when a rabbi and a UU minister are stuck in a car on the way to Petra, Jordan? We talk theology, of course, right? Now, this isn't one of those bar jokes, because I don't even drink. So we talk theology, and I was sharing with him. I said, you know, I have kind of lost faith in humanity. I don't have much hope for our world in the future, you know? I feel like this is a reality TV version of that Netflix show, Don't Look Up. That if a meteor hits us, we're all gonna die, right? And I said, oh, more and more, I'm feeling like if we were to revive that ark with Noah and Naamah, that I couldn't find many people to fit in that ark. I'd find a lot of animals and plants that would fit in there, but again, I'm just having a difficult time here, having an optimistic view of humanity with all the destruction that's going on and all the greed and fear and hate that's going on. So I basically came out to him as an agnostic universalist. Because technically, as a universalist, I'm supposed to think everyone has inherent worth and dignity, we're all gonna be saved, it's all gonna be good, but I don't know if I could go there. And at the time, I didn't have this handy-dandy quote from the Reverend Nancy MacDonald Ladd with me, who says, the great universalists who preached universalism when universalism wasn't cool never assumed that human beings' intentions could be pure and unblemished. They simply believed that God's love was more powerful than our deadlier proclivities. Right? Isn't that a powerful statement? Well, I didn't have that with me. So instead, I told him, I said, well, the only thing I could think of that keeps me going is because, well, let me think about it for a little bit. And then he started going off on, well, how could you even consider yourself a religious person if you believe that, you know, you can't have hope in humanity? And I was thinking, well, this isn't the first time that as a Unitarian Universalist I'm not called religious, right? And I said, well, but here's the thing. I do believe that it's a calling for me to do this work. And I pointed him to his own teachings, the Talmud, which says, do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Do justly now. Love mercy now. Walk humbly now. You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it. So that was a very clear moment for me of what it was that I was being called to do as a religious leader. And then I got back home, and as you all probably know, February, March is one of the dry seasons here in the state, right? So all my plants were dying, and I decided to, and weeds were coming up. It was a bloody mess, let me just tell you. And so I decided to install sprinklers, but I thought in order to install a sprinkler system, I need to at least make sure that there's mulch around that messy garden and to take off those wooden planks that were rotted and termite infested and put like those plastic liners on. This was a big project, trust me. I got a quote for it. They were gonna charge me $5,000. I said, hell no, because I'm too cheap, right? So I decided to drag my sorry butt over to Home Depot and shop for these plastic liners, and I got down on my knees, people, and I began working on the garden by pulling out the weeds. Sorry, I'll just put that there. And touching the earth and being there in the soil and connecting with our planet. And through that act of humility, once in a while, I would see neighbors passing by, and they would tell me stuff like, oh, did you know that the previous owner was the one who planted those trees, right? That you're benefiting from now. I said, great, that's who I have to thank for having to rake these leaves and, all of that. And then the next neighbor who would come by while walking their dog would tell me, did you know, or, would just say, good job. And I thought that was nice and reassuring, right? And then the following neighbor would walk around and tell me, well, you do know this is Florida. It rains a lot, so those weeds are just gonna come on back, right? So I'm like, well, then what's the point? What's the point in weeding when they're just gonna come back anyway? And little did I know that those 3 comments that I heard from my neighbors could actually turn into a clarion call and a theology of what I'm supposed to do at this point. Nonetheless, before I get there, let me just say that after doing this act of weeding and cleaning up the garden, I ended up with a sore back, scratches all over my body, right? And definitely cuts and muscle aches, so on and so forth. Was it worth it? Well, this is how it turned out, right? Thank you. So for this act of transformation for me, it was definitely worth going into the ground and pulling up the weeds. So you might ask yourself at this point, what does that have to do with what you're called to do? Well, shortly thereafter, the goddess herself spoke to me. So I'll have you know, by the way, that I subject every single one of my congregations to at least one sermon about Amy Grant. And back when I was primarily preaching to a Christian audience, I told them, Amy Grant is the 4th person of the quadrinity. But being Unitarian, that makes it a lot easier because we believe at most in one God, right? And I know I've chosen my deity. So she came up with a song that perfectly encapsulated. I know she didn't write it. If you want to find out the real writers of the song that we just heard, you could go ahead and look it up on the order of service because I don't even have their names memorized. Needless to say, she approves of that song, otherwise she wouldn't sing it. And she said that that reflects her very own theology. So I listened to it over and over again, and tears began rolling down my face. Because the message I kept hearing was that all I needed to do in this life were 3 things. Number 1, planting trees. right? Number 2, praying for rain. And number 3, pulling out the weeds, right? Can you all do that with me? Planting trees, praying for rain, and pulling out the weeds. All right, y'all are so good at this. So what does planting trees mean these days, and what kind of seeds do we use? How about this? The newly approved, although we have one more year to go at GA, right, to fully approve it, Article 2, which talks about values of transformation and equity and generosity and justice and pluralism, interdependence, so on and so forth. What if those were to be the seeds that we plant? And number 2, praying for rain, in my mind, means praying for that which feeds and sustains your soul. So for me personally, that's traveling. I love to travel. And I also love to do what has now become subversive acts here in the state of Florida, such as attending an Orlando gay chorus event that Aubrey helped put together, right, back in April, and watching Kinky Boots at Orlando Shakes, right? You know, with drag queens and kids in the show, right? So that was kind of subversive. And going to an event with Michael Lewis that benefited a health program that provides gender-affirming care. So I pray to God that one day we won't need to have fundraisers for such events because the state will have to provide for it. But at this point, you know, that's the event we attended. By the way, I wanted to dispel a couple of fake news stories out there, and thank you, Linnea, for, reading my bio. So apparently, when I was having dinner at her and Ted's, there were rumors flying around. One of them was that I was Reverend Marnie's I'm Michael Lewis's new partner. Also not true. Single and not ready to mingle at this point. Thank you very much. And then the third one is pulling out the weeds. And by weeds, there are actually external weeds and internal ones. So the external ones are easy enough to pick out, right? These MAGA weeds. I did not say mega weeds, I said MAGA weeds, right? And people that we don't necessarily agree with politically, spiritually, or theologically. In other words, those who will not make my ark, right? And there's also the internal weeds, our own self-doubt, our own fear, our own anger. I think those need to be rooted out as well. So that's the act of internal weaving. And notice that when we talk about all these three things, they are in the present continuous tense. That's a fancy word, right? Meaning planting, praying, pulling, the ing at the end. That makes it a present continuous tense, or for you English geeks out there, it's also called the present progressive tense. I kind of like that one better, you know, as opposed to the present conservative tense, right? So what that means for me is it's kind of like the rinse, wash, repeat process in the laundromat, right? In the washing machine, which means that you do it over and over and over again until it becomes a spiritual practice. Now, again, all these things we do, not begrudgingly or out of a sense of obligation, but because it is a commitment. And like the Talmud says, you're not required to complete it, but neither are you to abandon it, right? Are you free to abandon it, is what the Talmud says. All right, I'm gonna wrap it up with an eschatology remark. What? Yeah, that's a fancy schmancy seminary term that I paid $30,000 to learn. But it basically means the destiny of humankind. What are we doing all this work for, of planting, praying, pulling. Well, one could argue that we want to do it because those trees will survive in the future, right? Isn't that what the song is kind of implying? That we're planting trees that we'll never see? Because at some point, you know, as the bridge says, statues fall and glories fade, but 100-year-old oak tree will give shade. And in many ways, that's what we've inherited. For me, Unitarian Universalism is like that 100-year-old oak tree that gives me shade when it's hot outside, when the world is on fire. That tree is providing me with the safety and comfort that I need. But the other possibility, to be honest with you, is that that tree could burn down like the trees in Canada have been burning down lately, right? Or those trees could be chopped down in order to grace the land for cows in Brazil, for example, and the Amazon rainforest. So there's all kinds of other possibilities with that tree, which is why I don't tend to use hope necessarily to describe the future. And again, this is what justifies my statement to my rabbi friend about why I don't have hope for humanity necessarily, because according to the song anyway, it just takes love and faith and grace a little time. Notice the omission of the word hope in there, right? And for me, that is an allusion or a reference to 1 Corinthians 13. Some of you may have heard the scripture passage before that talks about love is patient, love is kind, blah, 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 blah. And it says that at the end, the eschatology for that is these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love, right? So hope was excluded in there. And hope in English, for me, has such a positive, feel-good connotation, doesn't it? That according to Julian of Norwich, for example, all will be well, all manner of things will be well. Why do all of a sudden I sound more like Julia Child rather than Julian of Norwich? But it's the idea that the future will be one where justice will be realized. So in our own tradition, Theodore Parker first framed it as the arc of the moral universe is a long one, but it bends towards justice. Later on, Dr. King, quoted Theodore Parker on that. In Spanish, however, the word esperar means to wait in apprehension of either something good or evil to happen. So the future is not necessarily charted out already. So Dr. Miguel de la Torre, a professor at Isla School of Theology, says that in the desperation of the oncoming abyss, one may desire hope for its avoidance of reality. But hopelessness embraces the reality, recognizing that commitment to liberated principles is what defines our very humanity. So according to Dr. may not necessarily have the luxury to be able to afford. So how do we embrace hopelessness as a possible reality without necessarily giving in to despair? And therein lies the balancing act, and therein again is where our collective liberation comes into play, and where we are all asked to make a commitment. Bottom line, I don't know what's gonna happen to Florida. I do know that the Equality Florida, the Human Rights Campaign, the NAACP have all put out an advisory for folks, for LGBTQ plus folks especially, to travel to the state and even to live here. And the New York Times just 3 weeks ago came up with an article that says that 56% of LGBTQ plus folks here in Florida are planning to leave. We're the new wave of refugees out there. And I actually include myself in that category. I have the privilege enough of being mobile, and my hello and my goodbye sermon to you all. And what I do know is that I have faith in each and every single one of you, including you tuning in virtually, that you will stay committed to this work. What I do know is that we're placing my bets. And you know what? I've seen this community come together before. So on July 4th, I went for the first time to the Pulse Memorial. And I saw those pictures. I learned anything from that moment about what it means to be a community, about what it means to be called together to fight for each other's collective liberation. And I know that Orlando Strong hopefully was not just a saying back then, but that is still a saying now, because more than ever, I need each and every single one of you to be strong. Our future depends on it. Until then, please say it with me, let's keep planting those trees, praying for rain, and pulling out the weeds. Amen. Will you please join me now in singing our closing hymn? And this is actually a participatory one, so I'm going to invite Linnea and Paul to come up, please, and join me. It's called Trees of the Field, and if it sounds Jewish, that's because it's based off of the book of Isaiah. And we're going to do the chorus because that's when the clapping comes along, right? So, are you ready? All right, so after we do the trees of the fields will clap their hands, we'll clap twice, all right? So Aubrey, can you give us a demo on this?
Sure. And all the trees of the field will clap their hands. The trees of the field will clap their hands. The trees of the field will clap their hands while you go out with joy.
And it'll go faster and faster, so please try to keep up. We're gonna sing it a few times here, all right? Ready? Here we go.
You shall go out with joy and be led forth with peace.
The mountains and the hills will break forth before you. There'll be shouts of joy, and all the trees of the field will clap their hands. Not yet.
The trees of the field will clap their hands. The trees of the field will clap their hands. The trees of the field will clap their hands while you go out with joy. You shall go out with joy and be led forth with peace. The mountains and the hills will break forth before you. There'll be shouts of joy, and all the trees of the field will clap their hands. And all the trees of the field will clap their hands. The trees of the field will clap their hands. The trees of the field will clap their hands while you go out with joy. You will go out with joy and be led forth with ease. The mountains and the hills will break forth before you. There'll be shouts of joy, and all the trees of the field will clap their hands. And all the trees of the field will clap their hands. The trees of the field will clap their hands. The trees of the field will clap their hands while you go out with joy. You shall go out with joy, be led forth with peace. The mountains and the hills will break forth before you. There'll be shouts of joy, and all the trees of the field will clap their hands. And all the trees of the field will clap
And our benediction is once more from the Reverend Nancy MacDonald Lab. And now, though sorrow and pain abide, let us gather what strength we have, what confidence and valor and faith, for we live to tell the story of our days, and in this telling, as in this weeping, we are not alone, but connected in mystery and wonder through the veil of our own pain to ourselves, to each other, and to all that remains holy, even in times such as these. May it be so, and amen. Namaste, and blessed be.
Please say these words with me as we extinguish the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.